Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Wright Experience. I'm Dr. William T. Wright Jr., the founder and host of this show, and I'm absolutely excited to extend our portfolio once again tonight. We have an amazing guest that we will be presenting shortly. Before we get into that, I'd like to take the opportunity to recognize our sponsor of this podcast that is now in its fourth year, going into its fifth year very shortly here, believe it or not. The Wright Experience, we're certainly excited to be expanding the work that we do. The Wright Experience is sponsored by Infinity Force Group, LLC. Infinity Force Group works to support leaders looking to have an infinite impact in leadership through charter school management, executive search coaching and consulting, motivational speaking, and mentoring. Infinity Force Group can be reached at infinityforcegroup@gmail.com or through their website at www.infinityforcegroup.com. And we certainly would love to hear from you as we continue to do that work. My guest tonight on the Wright Experience is a gentleman that I've known for many, many years. Used to work with his father-in-law as well as his wife and him as a teacher in the Harnett County public school system in North Carolina that I was fortunate enough to work with some years ago, and excited about having him here. My guest is Mr. Guy Hill. Guy Hill is an English teacher at Triton High School in Harnett County, North Carolina, where he taught for 26 of the 29 years of his teaching career. When you see him in a few minutes, you won't think that he's been teaching 29 years, but he has. He's a graduate of both the University of North Carolina, we won't hold that against him, with a bachelor's degree in English, and Wake Forest University with a master's degree in education. He teaches regular and honors 9th and 10th grade English, advanced placement language and composition, and advanced placement African American studies. He has served as a member of the board of directors and president of the North Carolina English Teachers Association, NCETA, and is the current president. He served on the board of directors of the National Humanities Center. Mr. Hill has also worked in test development in conjunction with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction in several capacities, including item writer, item reviewer, range finding, standard setting committees. He was also awarded the Marvin Pittman Champion of Education Award in 2018 in conjunction with, sponsored by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. He was also a recipient of the Educational Leadership Award by the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission in 2020. He served for Governor Beverly Perdue's Teacher Advisory Committee and currently serves on the executive board of Governor Roy Cooper's DRIVE, which is developing a representative and inclusive vision for education task force. And he also currently serves on the executive board of the DRIVE Coalition at the Dudley Flood Center at North Carolina State University. They much better. Never mind. We won't go into that. He was also awarded one of the inaugural North Carolina America 250 Scholar Fellowships, and he was named a North Carolina Teacher Ambassador. He is married to Angela McCall Hill, and they have 2 daughters. And at this time, I'd like to welcome to the Wright Experience, Mr. Guy Hill. How you doing?
Hello, how you doing? Doing fine, Dr. Wright. Good to see you. How you doing today?
I am doing well. And the last picture I saw of the girls, they are really growing up. I'm telling you, I was like, it cannot have been that many years. But anyway,
Charlotte's should be in the 9th grade next year, and of course,
wow.
oldest Zora's in college.
How about that? Well, congratulations on that, my brother.
Thank
So,
you.
man, I'm excited. Happy to have you here. Happy to have you aboard. Got a lot of stuff we want to try to cover, and we'll see how it goes. We might have to have a part B, to be honest with you.
Oh, indeed.
Because as a teacher, you guys are right there in the the battleground, so to speak. I don't know if we call it a battleground. We'll get your perspective on that. But certainly, teaching is a very valued profession right now, and there's been a lot of talk about teacher salaries and you know what needs to be done about them and so forth. So let's jump right into that. Let's talk about that. How do we effectively compensate teachers for the amazing work that they do?
Yeah, and that's been a problem in North Carolina for several years. We had the master's degree pay differentiation where teachers who have specialized degrees, master's degrees, get 10%. We have 10% extra. We have national board that gives 12% to teachers. But unfortunately, the past 5 or 6 years in the legislature, they've raised beginning teacher salaries, which is good, but they have not compensated the experienced teachers, the teachers years 20, 25 years and up. And so that has created an unbalanced teacher pay scale. And so when I started the profession, I was making about $25,000 my first year. And now, I'm making, a little bit more than 60,000. So my salary's basically doubled. The teachers coming in now make $43,000, and I promise you, on the end of that, their salary does not double. And so what's happened is the teachers coming in, they see over the long haul, 15, 20 years, their salary is increasing by about $10,000, maybe 15 if they get national board certification, and they're not really staying in the profession for a long time. They're coming in maybe 5, 6 years, and then they're leaving because they look at that scale and it's not beneficial to them. And so we're losing experienced teachers who are seeing where the raises are not going, they're retiring. And then we see young teachers coming in and they're not staying. So you're not getting that well-seasoned educator 15, year 12 through year 20 or so. And I think that is, really harming the profession as a whole. And we've got a teacher shortage just on the horizon. We've got one now. We have several positions in many schools that are not filled. They have long-term subs. It's hurting the level of instruction. And so it's a problem that's bad right now, but it's going to get worse if it's not addressed. And so and North Carolina used to be in the forefront of salary, the salary schedule, but they're falling behind their regional counterparts like Alabama, Mississippi, who are giving experienced teachers, years 2025 and up, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 raises every year to get them closer to 70,000, 75,000. And that's not happening in North Carolina right now. And North Carolina is poised to lose an excellent resource for education and public education by losing many of its experienced teachers. And that's not good for public education. And plus also spending so much money with private school vouchers. And much of that money is going to the private school. Sorry, I had a little guest here. Some of that money is going to the private school vouchers to pay for students to have private education, paying for that with public funds, and so it's a very problematic system.
So we'll get to that. I'm gonna come back to those private school vouchers in a minute, but let's recap something because I want to make sure because this is an important subject. So. I started, we just learned today, I started the year before you did. I was 98. Indeed. I think you said you were 99. So I remember my first paycheck was $23,800. There's a reason why I remember that. I'll probably talk about offline, but it was $23,800. I just come out of manufacturing and actually took a pay cut. So what I hear you saying, because I want to make sure that the audience understands, you have dedicated almost 30 years to the profession.
Yes.
You have a master's degree, and your salary has just doubled in that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I heard you say.
That's
So,
what I said.
the advocacy needs to be that if we are going to fill classrooms with qualified people who dedicate
Mm-hmm.
themselves to the profession,
Mm-hmm.
then we need to be a little bit more intentional about doing justice with compensation. Is really what I hear you saying.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a little
You
different
get
now. I can say stuff that never mind.
you get what you pay for. That's an old
That's right.
adage,
That's
and
right.
it's so
That's right.
true. It's so
Yeah,
true. You
yeah.
pay for
And so we
quality,
are
you get
losing
quality.
people because there are other professions now that do not require as much formal
Mhm.
education and provide all kinds of incentives if people do go back to
Mhm.
school that we don't always receive in education. Great stuff. Great stuff.
Mhm.
So you mentioned private schools and the whole voucher trend and those kinds of things. So expound on that a little bit for folks that may not understand how that works. So if
Mhm.
my child is assigned to a public school
Mhm.
and they end up going to private school, what happens?
Mhm.
Let's talk about that in brass tacks.
Right, good question. In North Carolina and in many states also, you can be assigned to a public school, but then you have an option to go to a private school if you like. The way that's usually been done is if you go to a private school, you put forth the money to pay the tuition for that private school.
Right.
So public funds, public tax dollars have traditionally gone to public schools where everyone is welcome. Yeah, anyone can go to a public school. Private schools are more selective. They can deny a student attendance at their private school if they so choose. Some private schools are Christian schools, so if you don't follow, Christian Judeo-Christian values, then you cannot be a student at their school. So what North Carolina created was a voucher system which took public money, public funding, and it gave scholarships to students to attend private schools, so the parents would not have to pay for that out of pocket. And it's a tiered schedule. So if you make more money, you get less money with the voucher. Um, but that's the system that they created, and it started out with $100 million, $200 million, and now it's ballooned to about 700 or $800 million a year that goes to these private school vouchers. Now here's where part of the problem is: those private school vouchers, those private schools, there's almost no accountability. We Public schools have end of course testing. For high schools, we have end of grade testing. For elementary and middle schools, we have attendance requirements, we have graduation rates, all that information that goes into our report card grade, where it evaluates how efficient we are as a school system, and that's individual schools, and that's information the public can access very easily. Private schools do not have to report any of that information. Even disciplinary action, they don't have to report any of that. And so there's very little accountability for private schools, where there's a ton of accountability for public schools. And it just seems like an unfair comparison. We're comparing not apples and oranges, we're comparing apples and tires, because there's just no accountability. And so how do we know those private school voucher dollars are being used wisely and efficiently when there's no system to evaluate those private schools? And I would argue those private school vouchers are taking money that could be used in the private schools, perhaps on teacher salaries, perhaps on programs to help students with their reading and their literacy and writing and in any number of things. And so that is, and I would also argue that is creating a two-tiered system of education. And plus, another thing, and I'm from New York originally, and we have plenty of private schools in New York. But the thing with New York is you could take the public transportation to get you to those private schools. These private schools don't have buses, so if you live in an environment where you're not wealthy, how do you get transportation to the private school to take advantage of the opportunities if it's not really close to your home? And so there are so many problems with that system, and those are just a few of them.
Okay. Now you talked about accountability, and so for the audience, certainly you and I and the education professionals at large pretty much understand what you're talking about accountability. But expound on that a little bit. As a teacher, you're teaching 9th, 10th grade. Talk about what you are responsible for when it comes to testing, as opposed to someone who is not under an accountability system.
Got you. Well, in the high school level, we have four end of course tests, which are made by the state. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction makes state tests. And the four subjects are English 2, 10th grade English, biology, math 1, and math 3. And DPI contracts with teachers to help make these tests, which I've been a part of. It's a long process for the question to be part of an end of course test. But teachers do help write the questions. And so that's the accountability model, those four end of course tests. Also, we have tests. We have AP tests, advanced placement, which that's nationwide with advanced placement program through College Board. So we have that. We also have the ACT. So every 11th grade student in the state of North Carolina takes the ACT for free, and that also is used into the evaluation model, the performance composite model that schools are judged by. Every school gets a letter grade for several factors, but their EOC testing for high school, the ACT testing, the AP testing is a part of that also. CTE testing is a part of that also. The Career Technical Education Program. So those those students who take classes where they work with their hands, electrical trades, animal science, family and consumer sciences, those courses have a state test also, and that's also part of the accountability model. So all that gets put into how schools are evaluated. So every school gets a letter grade, A, B, C, D, or F, and there's a sliding scale for every school. Every school gets a number, and it fits into that letter grade. So that's how high schools are evaluated. Elementary and middle schools have end of grade tests. So that starts with grade 3, with some reading and math tests in grade 3. And every year, grades 3 through 8, students, elementary and middle school students take end of grade tests. And I believe 5th grade and 8th grade are science also. And
That's
every
correct.
grade is English and math. And so every school in North Carolina, elementary, middle, and high school gets a letter grade. There's a performance composite score. Anyone can go on the website, NC Report Card, and you can pull up your county according to the map. You can pull up any individual school, and you can see this a bunch of information about the school, their testing, information about their teachers as far as their degree level, their level of experience, graduation rate, attendance. There's just a bunch of information that gets put into that performance composite.
And so your argument, and don't let me speak for you, because I know you do a very good job of doing that yourself. Your argument is not that you're against accountability, but that you believe all people should have to go through accountability. Is that the case, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not against accountability. I've taught English 1, had EOC at one point. We had a writing test. I taught 10th grade, which had a writing test. I teach 10th grade now, which has an EOC. I teach AP, which has a test. So basically every subject I've taught within English has had either a state or a national test that my students had to take. I have no problem with accountability, but if you're going to compare public schools to private schools, then we should be judged by the same standards. And if we're not evaluated by the same method, then how can you say, well, private schools are doing so much better than public schools? Are they really? By what method? By what data? What tool are you using to establish that private schools are doing better than public schools? And if you don't have an answer for that question, then I would submit that you really don't know what you're talking about. And so that's the bone of contention I have with the voucher system is we're giving money to a private school system and we don't know if the money is being used effectively and if those programs, this funding is working because we haven't evaluated them like we scrutinize and evaluate public schools.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, let's do something here. I am going here, Mr. Hill. We've kind of opened the door now, so we might as well walk in it. There is a considerable amount of conversation going on right now about depends on which day of the week we look, the disbanding, the changing, the dissolving, whatever you want to call it, of the U.S. Department of Education. And so speaking as a 29, 30-year veteran teacher, you have seen the benefits firsthand, I'm sure, of what the U.S. Department of Ed does. Speak to your thoughts about that. Let me just open it up that way.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and I forgot one thing. I started Triton in '99. I started my teaching career in 1996, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, mid '90s. Wild time.
All right.
But so what most people don't know is the Department of Education does not run schools in any state. Each state runs their schools. Each state has a Department of Public Instruction of some name, and the state develops their own standards, their own testing. So schools, by and large, public schools by and large, are run by individual states. And what the Department of U.S. Department of Education does is to make sure that education that students receive is as equitable as possible. So what they do is they put some funding and they put structure underneath that system so that those students who have the least are still able to access a solid and sound education. And so what they do is they fund many programs where students students may need some help, like students who have learning disabilities, students who have physical disabilities, students who may have certain mental disabilities. Because again, as public schools, we have to take in every student. If you come in the door and register at a school, we have to take you, and I have no problem with that because I take all. We take all comers, and but sometimes we have to adapt and change what we're doing to accommodate students who may have some problems learning or problems getting around school or other kind of situations where they need a little bit of extra help. And that's what that's what the U.S. Department of Education provides. They provide funding and they make sure that teachers follow IEPs, individual education plans for students who may have learning disabilities. They make sure we follow 504 plans for students who may have a traumatic brain injury from a car accident, from some problem, being born prematurely, being deprived of oxygen as a child, or any number of problems that I couldn't list for you right now exactly, but those are some examples. And so that's most of what the U.S. Department of Education does. One thing that I've heard in the public discourse about public education is the NAEP scores and how our students have our NAEP scores have fallen. One of the things that I did, I was on one of the committees for NAEP several years ago. And so I got a chance to work with the NAEP. The NAEP stands for the National Assessment.
Yeah, National Assessment of Educational Progress, I think it is.
Yes, educational progress. So people talk about the NAEP score, but what they don't understand is that NAEP doesn't test a large cross-section of students. They test a very small number of students. They try to provide a cross-section of students where they got to get rural students, urban students at urban schools, all over from different parts of the country, but it's not a large number of students. It's not like, a million students. I can't remember exactly what the numbers are, but and what people also don't understand is that testing is a snapshot. It is a picture of a student on that particular day of how they're performing. It's not necessarily a statement for what that student has learned all throughout their educational career. It's one day. And so sometimes they have portfolios or they have several days testing, but usually it's with different subjects. So people get all caught up in NAEP scores, but what they don't understand is that it's a small number of students. It's a sort of a random number of students who are tested. And so even if you go to the NAEP website, they tell you that you're not supposed to extrapolate about public education as a whole in any state based on the NAEP scores. But people do that because they don't understand what they're talking about. They don't understand educational data. They don't understand the depth and the nuance that goes into looking at test score. They look at a score and I think they can extrapolate based on that score. And that's not how you look at data. There are many different factors that go into interpreting data. What does this data mean? What does it tell you? And if you don't know how to do that, then I really don't think people who don't know how to do that should be speaking about the subject, and they don't really understand what they're talking about, because then they disparage public education without really knowing what it is we're doing or what it is test scores actually show.
Do you believe that it is an issue of not understanding or not wanting to understand in the case of some people?
My mother, who was a teacher in New York City public schools for the better part of 35, 40 years, used to say, there's none so blind as he who will not see. And I think some people, they choose to cherry pick what they want to fit their narrative. And rather than really researching and asking the people who understand what's going on, like teachers, like administrators, like people in the community, rather than seeking to understand a topic, they just want to produce rhetoric about that topic, and they look for things to fit the narrative they already have in their head, rather than going in saying, I'm not sure about this. Let me look at this and see what's here. They already think they know what's there, and then they see what they want to see. And I think there is too much of that happening when people talk about education. And it's to the detriment of the system as a whole, but it's also to the detriment of students and communities.
Amen. Thank you for that perspective. It's I'm loving this because, again, you are to quote a phenomenon of a song. Now you're boots on the ground. You are experiencing this work every day. So thank you for that.
And if I could just say one more thing about looking at data, I got my master's degree from Wake Forest University, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to what a great job Wake Forest Education Graduate School did. I'm an English guy. I work with words and literary concepts, but I had a great math professor, Dr. Leah McCoy, who I remember taking that statistical data class and educational data, and I was dreading it, but she made it so easy that even an English person like me can understand. And, Dr. Joseph Milner, who heads that program at Wake Forest, he's passed away, but he was a great professor, great leader of that program. Wake Forest University has a great education program. It definitely prepared me to teach English, prepared me to really, really delve deeply into education, and not just teach, in air quotes, but really understand what I'm doing on a very deep level. And I would be remiss if I didn't say something positive about Wake Forest University and their education program now. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Wake Forest University. Go Demon Deacons.
Very, very good. Very good. As long as you didn't mention that other place. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, they did a great job too with English, but we won't mention them by name, those Tar Heels.
That's a good thing. Well, we in an earlier kind of prep for this show, we talked about a topic that I think you've been doing some research and wanted to talk to my audience about tonight. And so we'll certainly yield way for that now. Just about this whole Wilmington 1898 thing that you, I'd like for you to expound on what you'd like our listeners to know about that experience and what we can learn from it moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to talk about what happened in Wilmington 1898 on November 10th. There is an excellent documentary about it on PBS, part of their American Experience, about what happened in Wilmington 1898. So in a nutshell, there was a fusion government in Wilmington, which Republican government of the time, kind of recruited some African Americans shortly after the Civil War, about 20, 30 years after the Civil War, to run for office, and they won political office. And so the fusion government was in place in Wilmington. Wilmington was one of the largest cities in North Carolina by population during that time. I think the largest city during that time. And it also had the largest percentage of African Americans living in Wilmington, right by the water. So, many Black people involved in the shipping industry and things of that nature. Very thriving city in North Carolina during that time. Well, the Democrats, or white Democrats during that time, did not like this fusion government. And so they hatched an idea. They were going to overthrow the fusion government. And it was going to be a violent overthrow. It was a coup d'etat. So what happened in Wilmington in 1898 was the only successful coup d'etat in American history. So what they did, they got the light infantry together in Wilmington, and they marched on the Daily Record. And there's a backstory about that as well. The Daily Record responding to an article, a speech by a Georgia congresswoman who was talking about lynching Black men. And so he responded to that, and that got him in trouble with some of the white people in Wilmington. And so the light infantry stormed the Daily Record, the newspaper that he owned. Alex Manley is his name. And they destroyed the Daily Record. They burned it to the ground. And then they decided to go in the surrounding neighborhoods and basically kill any Black person that they saw there. So many Black people were killed. I think it's somewhere between 20 and 100, 150 Black people. No one knows for sure because some of the bodies were never recovered. And so the people who were not killed, they hid out in the cemetery, the Black cemetery, and many of them were run out of town. Many of them left of their own volition, because why would they want to stay with that kind of violence? Many of them were run out of town and prevented from coming back to Wilmington. And so some of them went to different parts of the country, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia. And so then the next day, the white Democrats got the political people together, the mayor, the aldermen, people like that, who had been duly elected in those offices, and they basically, tied them up and threatened to murder them if they didn't renounce their positions, which they did. And then they appointed people to replace those people, and thus the coup was finalized. And so the political parties changed from Republican to Democrat, and some names that people might know: Charles B. Aycock was involved in that situation. Josephus Daniels, who was the owner of the Raleigh News and Observer, the same News Observer that's in publication today, was a part of that. And some other, very important people at the time. They were all involved in the massacre and in the coup. And then the very next year, in 1899, the North Carolina State Legislature passed new laws to prevent Black people from voting, and they instituted a literacy test, which was not even really a literacy test. You had to recite a part of the Constitution, and the people who were there to hear it could decide what part you would you would have to recite, and so very hard to prepare for that. And if you were illiterate or whatever, you couldn't do that. You couldn't recite part of the Constitution, which was the literacy test. Then there was a grandfather clause initiated also. So if your grandfather could vote, then you could vote and not have to take literacy tests. Well, obviously, who's that negatively affect? Black people, because they're the children of slaves. Obviously, their grandfathers didn't vote, so that eliminated them. They also put a poll tax in where you had to pay a poll tax in order to vote. So you had a poll tax, grandfather clause, literacy test that prevented Black people in North Carolina from voting, and that changed North Carolina's voting for 100 years almost. And this was the template that was used throughout the South. Jim Crow laws were put in place that basically did the same thing all over the South. And so many people look at what happened in Wilmington with the coup d'etat and the massacre of 1898, and they look at that being the starting point for many of the Jim Crow laws that came into existence in the early 1900s. And so this is something that all North Carolinians should know, and many of them don't. And so as part of my AP African American Studies class, we will definitely be delving into what happened in Wilmington in 1898. The University of Wilmington has done a ton of work with what happened in Wilmington. That's where I really got a chance to research this at a National Endowment for the Humanities seminar at UNC Wilmington 2 summers ago. And so I'm just trying to do what I promised I would do as part of my project, which was to talk about this and teach this to as many people as I possibly could. And so I presented at different workshops in North Carolina, Social Studies Conference, a reading conference, North Carolina English Teachers Association conference about Women's 1898. So I'm trying to get the word out, and it fits in North Carolina standards because 8th grade is North Carolina history. And this is a very, very important part of North Carolina history that should be taught in every school in North Carolina, especially in the 8th grade. And there's also a part in the standards about teaching about democracy and threats to democracy. And I would think a coup d'etat would be a very important threat to democracy that needs to be studied and needs to be taught in 8th grade. And so that's Wilmington 1898.
It sounds like I'm hearing you say that there are places where there is resistance to teaching this.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Why do you think that is, and why do you think it's so important that folks learn and know about this?
I think there is resistance to teaching this kind of thing because I think there is a segment of American society that doesn't want to address the wounds of the past. And my contention has always been, how can you heal from something that you're afraid to talk about? How can you heal from something that you don't want to engage with? And I think there needs to be some healing in this country about many different things. But issues of race is definitely one of them. And clearly these people were targeted because of their race. So that needs to be something that is explored, that is taught, because history is important. And if this happened in history and it had repercussions that affected people, which it did, then it's something that needs to be taught and studied, just like any other historical event. Japanese internment is something that needs to be studied, because if we're not careful, the old saying, history can repeat itself. Right. And so, I teach the Holocaust. I teach Elie Wiesel's Night. And I teach that because people need to understand what happened, because it was a tragedy what happened. And we've got to make sure that these things don't happen again. And we have to make sure, too, to explore the reason why they happen. The reason why discrimination and hatred is proliferated, and how can we stop that in small ways? Because these things in history rarely just happen in big moments. There are small things that lead up to these big moments. So how can we stop the small things that get us in trouble, that get us to hating people who look differently than us, or who do things differently than the way we do them? How do we stop that hatred? Um, and that's why whenever I go, I've had the pleasure. Uh, I've been blessed to hear several Holocaust survivors speak, and I always ask them the same question. I always asked them. A.P. Osik was a Holocaust survivor. Her speak, who's local in Raleigh, passed away a few years ago. And he said this when I asked him, "What do you want? What's the main thing you want our students to learn about the Holocaust?" And I remember A.P. Osik said, "Make sure they learn to not hate each other."
Yeah.
And I think that was a very important thing, and I've always remembered that. It's been 10 to 15 years since he told me that, and I still remember that. And I tell my students that. And I think we think sometimes that hatred is this big, ugly thing that happens where people are yelling and cursing at each other and calling each other names. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it's just in the ways that we think, in the jokes that we tell, in the ways that we stereotype people. I think there's hatred in there sometimes. And if we don't stop it there, then it kind of grows to an out of control situation. And so
Okay.
I think that all of those things are important.
Right.
History is important because we've got to learn from it and move on from it and talk about it and heal the things that need to be healed so we can move forward as one people.
Super outstanding. Mr. Hill, we could go on for another hour. I've got
Indeed.
some more questions, but here's what we'll do.
Okay.
We'll come up with a part B. We'll get you back
Right.
probably right after the first of the year. I'd love to
Okay.
continue some conversations. Thank you for agreeing to be a part of the show and coming on and opening our eyes to the perspective that is most important in our field of education. I tell people all the time, although it's been some years, I'll just say it that way, since I've physically been in the classroom, I still understand to this day that the most important place in the education arena is the classroom. Because without that work that you guys do every day to grow and nurture and educate and motivate young folks, we would not have a society. And the minute that we forget that, we're going to have trouble. If you'll hold on with me for just 1 minute, we'll come back and close out the show.
All right. Yes, sir.
To the Wright Experience audience, thank you once again for being a part of this work that we're doing. We've been going now since 2021, and I'm thankful to each of you that are a part of the work that we're doing. Don't forget to look up and get into our sponsor and see if that sponsor can help you. It's Infinity Force Group at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And some of your needs in terms of leadership development. We're excited about the work that firm is doing, and we're also excited to have them as a sponsor of the Wright Experience. Sometime between now and the new year, I will do a director's episode, a CEO's episode, if you want to call it, and talk about some things that are near and dear to my heart. Won't be a very long episode, but we're going to do that sometime between now and the end of the 2025 calendar year. I want to talk a little bit about some of my observations as a leader and how we all can grow and get a little better. As we go into the 2026 school year, we're going to continue to expand our portfolio. We're looking for guests. If you have guests, please reach out to us, and you can do it right at that same email address should you choose to, infinityforcegroup at gmail.com, and we'll get that information and get guests on, as well as some of our guests like Mr. Hill, like you heard tonight. We'll be inviting them back to get some continued perspective on what we can learn about getting better. This work is all about us getting better and becoming stronger leaders and learning more and doing more. That's what the show was founded on, and we're going to continue to do that. And just want to thank you all for being a part of it. Mr. Hill, thank you, my brother. I am excited and happy that you chose to be a part of the Wright Experience. And now that you have been branded as an ambassador to the show, we're going to get you back up here and talk about some things. And as you have things that you like for our audience to know about, this platform is open for you to do so.
Dr. Wright, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. Like I said, you and I go way back, and I really
Absolutely.
appreciate you and all the work you've done in education. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, that I've given almost 30 years of my life to, and maybe many more. We'll see. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I enjoy working with students, and they are the future of our society and our democracy. And whenever anybody talks about me being a teacher and how good a teacher I am, I always stop them and say, it's my students. They do the work. I just tell them what to do. I ask the right questions, no pun intended,
Right.
but they put the work in and they make it happen. And so my teaching career is not about me. It's about my students, and it's about what they do, what they're learning, how they're growing, how they're evolving as individuals. And when I see them after they've graduated and I see them doing great things, that's what it's all about. And it's been a pleasure being here tonight. Thank you very much. And I look forward to continuing this discussion.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much again. And to the Wright Experience audience, thank you and good evening.